Hey, good morning, everyone. It is Monday morning. We are back at school. We have a full week in front of us. It's the start of a new week, and it is the start of the second quarter. Now, I know some of you may have picked up on the rhythm, and you might be asking, wait a minute, where's Mr. Fortney? Well, Mr. Fortney's still on his trip to China. So, everybody, you get me again. Yeah, good. I'm excited too. So let's go ahead and get into this week's memory verse and this week's devotion. We're going to kick off. Our next verse is coming from the book of Ezekiel. We are going to the Old Testament. We are working on a new character trait. So our new character trait this week is to be discerning. And again, our memory verse is in Ezekiel. And so our memory verse says, "They will teach my people the difference between what is holy and what is common, what is ceremonial, clean and unclean. They will serve as judges to resolve any disagreements among my people. Their decisions must be based on my regulations, and the priests themselves must obey my instructions and decrees at all the sacred festivals, and see to it that the Sabbaths are set apart as holy days." Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, what in the world is this talking about? Who is the they? Well, in this verse, the they is referring to the priest of Israel. Now, normally when we say priest, we just think of the people who lead ceremonial activities and festivities. But the priests had very, very important jobs at that time. Not only did they lead religious activities, but they were also teachers. And it even says that in the first part of the verse. It says, "They will teach my people the difference." So the priests had an important role. They had to teach people what was clean and what was unclean. And then you might say, well, if it was dirty, what does it matter? But being clean and ceremonially unclean was a huge difference, because sometimes the food was considered ceremonially unclean. And if it was unclean, you couldn't eat it, you couldn't wear it, and in some cases you couldn't even touch it. If you were to touch an unclean animal or an unclean portion of an animal, then you yourself took on that uncleanliness, and you yourself were considered unclean. That uncleanliness was representation of sin. So even if you were to take in a little sin, if you ate it and took in a big sin, if you only just brushed your hand or your arm against it and took in a little sin, you still contaminated yourself with sin. And that was the priest's job, to help people know. They needed to know what was clean and unclean. They needed to be taught what was sin and what was not sin. And that's where our character trait comes in. We have to be discerning. See, the word discerning means the ability to see something. And most of the time when we use the word discerning, we think of it and we use it in a spiritual or religious meaning or religious context. So basically what that was saying is that in order for us to avoid the unclean things, in order for us to avoid sin, we had to be able to look at something, and we have to be able to know whether it was clean or unclean. We had to be able to discern what God wanted us to do. Now, of course, the only way for us to be able to properly discern is for us to stay in communication with God. And that's what the priests were here to do. So they were to teach us, and they were to teach the Israelites what was considered clean and unclean. They were also to teach what was holy and unholy. Again, the only true way to know that is to be able to discern it with God's help. In order to be able to teach that, the priests also had to be in communication with God, because it's really difficult to teach something if you don't have a good grasp on it. If you can ask your teachers, ask them if they know what they're trying to teach you. If they don't know what it is, whether it's math or science or Spanish or anything like that, if we don't know what it is that we're trying to teach you, we're not very effective teachers. So it was really important for the priests to work on their connection to God, so that they could help the people of Israel work on their own connection to God. So as we go through this, sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be called to look at something, and you're going to have to discern whether it's right or wrong, whether it's clean or unclean, and you're going to have to make the decision. That decision may separate you from your friends. that decision may separate you from your family. And are you going to be strong enough when you discern what's right and wrong? Are you going to be strong enough to stand in agreement with God? And that was the role of the priest. That is what they were doing. And then finally it says if there was any sort of misunderstanding or any sort of quarrel, that the priest had to settle it. And the only way for them to settle it again was with God's help, and so that they could be able to discern or tell the difference between what was right and what was wrong, what was true and what was untrue. And so that's what we're called to do in our Christian walk. And so as we go forward, let's remember that in order for us to properly discern, we have to stay in communication with God. And we're actually going to have to ask God for his help to help us discern what is right and what is wrong. So that's our verse for this week. I want you guys to go out, have an awesome start to the new quarter. Have a fantastic first full week. Back in a couple of weeks. And until next time, God bless you. Bye.